It's time to get educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. This is the Dr. Duke Show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show. We got a great program for you today, so please hit that share button and share. Today's show is sponsored by Mike Lindell and our friends at MyPillow. Many of you know MyPillow was kicked out of most big box stores for supporting Donald Trump. Those big box stores are now being looted, so there. But their loss is your gain. With the holiday season upon us, MyPillow is offering their classic pillow for just 20 bones. That's an amazing price. But you got to use the access code Dr. Duke, D-R-D-U-K-E. You can also save up to 66% on other items when you visit MyPillow.com. Again, that code D-R-D-U-K-E to save a bundle and get that classic MyPillow for the holiday season. Stop the presses. Today we start with a study out of Harvard, that actually concludes, are you waiting? You waiting? Homeschool kids not only grow into well-adjusted adults, but they are more responsible, they volunteer more, and they have no problem socializing with others. I would jump into the story, but I'm wondering how cold it's in hell right now.
Well, I mean, those are all the things that I, growing up, and maybe even you growing up, had heard. Well, those homeschool kids,
they're socially warped.
They're socially warped. They don't know how to interact with humans. And yet, Harvard, actually the Harvard Human Flourishing Program to be specific, and the researchers are Brendan Case and Ying Chen of the Harvard Human Flourishing Program, they actually found, looking at not just like, one or two families, they looked at 12,000 children of nurses. So they specifically, because that way they could do the long-term study here. And they found the data shows, you know what, those homeschool kids are actually not so bad. And so when you take a look at the data that they used, it was surveys, is how they collected it, from 1999 to 2010. And they examined how school type, and they estimated independently through factors such as socioeconomic status, race, and region, how that affected the adolescents on various long-term outcomes, including educational attainment, mental health, and social integration. And tell me more about this homeschool result.
Oh, it's amazing.
Because I want to hear it out of the teacher's mouth.
Yeah, you got to hear it. First of all, I got to say, as a 30-year university professor, surrounded by professors who hate and despise homeschool and really don't like homeschool kids, the funny thing is that they have to concede. When the progressive left says that homeschool kids aren't socialized, that means these kids come to class, they don't get drunk and skip class. They say, yes, ma'am, no, sir, that they're polite. They're actually, this is what, to the college professors, is annoying, right? These kids show up. They're there every day. They're prepared. They say, yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am. They have manners. That's what they mean by socially awkward.
Yes, but here's the thing. By the time they get to you, they don't actually get to you, because 23% of homeschool kids were less likely to attend college than the public school students. And I wonder why. Because they don't actually need those. It's not even, I can't even say a 4-year degree. A $600,000
waste of. And that is a mark of maturity. Everything that the left doesn't like about homeschooling is that they're really mature kids, right? And they're smart enough to know that college isn't for everybody. These kids are we're learning now, they're getting a better education than they're getting in the public schools. They're more mature. They are much better with money. They're able to realize that for many of their goals and objectives, they don't need 4 years of college. You mentioned that while homeschool students were 23% less likely to attend college, they were 33% more likely to volunteer in their communities, 31% more forgiving of the foibles and misdeeds of others, and 51% more likely to attend religious services, which probably even more than homeschool says a lot about their character.
Well, and if you stop and just think about this for one moment, okay, when you homeschool your students, or if you attend Freedom Project Academy, you don't have to sit in a classroom for 8 hours straight. So all that time, think about a lifespan. When you look at it, it's smaller than small. And yet we're wasting how much time every day, every year in the public schools just sitting there. And that's why when you take a look at the homeschool kids, the fact that they are more likely to volunteer, they have a lot more time to just do that. They're more likely to attend religious services. The argument is, oh, I'm so tired on the weekends because you've been sitting in the classroom for 40 hours basically a week. Yeah, you have more time. You can actually attend church, maybe be in youth group. You can do lots of things like that. And then you can look around you, and I get why they'd be more forgiving. They're way more patient. They have more time to be like, oh, okay, I understand something maybe didn't go right. I'll forgive you for it. It makes sense when you stop and think about how the time is actually being spent in the public school, not even the education part, just the time.
Yeah, and I do think the link between particularly Christian homeschooling and homeschooling Christianity is a really nice combination because we know that those who attend church services, have substantially lower risks of alcohol, drug abuse, depression, suicide, and a lower risk of premature death for any reason over those who never attend church. That's a pretty good lineup of positive, virtuous ways to go about your life. You're much more insulated from the problems of society because you are at home with your parents, you're learning in a controlled environment, there are no gun shooters breaking into mom's kitchen to shoot you down. There is no radical sex education. They're not pushing goofy transgender ideology on 7 and 8 year olds. And then they go and get those worldviews reinforced in their churches. This is a winning combination. It's almost, you got to add now, remember the mantra, what's the one way to avoid poverty? Well, you get a high school diploma, you don't have children until you're married, right?
Yeah, out of wedlock. Yeah,
these are the ways of avoiding financial distress. Add another one, homeschool your kids.
Ooh.
That could be the other one to avoid poverty and disease and drug addiction. Homeschool your kids.
And of course, we're taking a look, and this data was, a 10-year period back there, 11-year period back in the early 2000s, but it's 2021, and we found out that in March, when we take a look at the U.S. Census Bureau, they actually reported, and we've kind of talked about this, that 11.1% of K-12 students in the nation are homeschooled. But Dr. Duke, it's a racist thing, right? Only those white kids are getting homeschooled because it's all about race.
It's roughly twice as many now since March of 2020. In basically a year and a half, we went from 5.4% homeschool kids to 11.1. And before you call this white supremacy, give us the stats, give us the deets on African-American rugrats.
Rugrats, what a show. So we actually reported on this back when the original data was coming out, and now it's just a little reminder, Mom and Dad at home, that among black families, it's just basically skyrocketing the number of homeschoolers. They went from 3.3% on average of black families homeschooling in spring 2020 to 16.1% by fall 2020. So just from one semester, basically summer break to the next, 3.3% to 16.1%.
Major applause and kudos to African-American families for doing that. Their kids were especially getting screwed over by the public schools. We know all of the left-wing changes in public schools haven't improved life for African-American kids. It's made it worse. The more power you give the left, the more their programs actually retard black progress. And so from 3% to 16% of African-Americans homeschooling your kids, that, my friends, is positive intervention. Keep doing it.
Are you a fan of the show? Consider joining the Patriot Club. Your tax-deductible donation of $99 a year keeps us going. Simply visit patriotclub.us. That's patriotclub.us to pledge your support and receive our signature tumbler as a token of our appreciation. We've got much more to come. Stay with us.
Here's a little riddle for you. How bad is it in our school system when a woman who escaped North Korea says that indoctrination is worse in the United States? How bad is it?
Yeah,
it's real bad.
Yeah, you think about that for a moment.
Bad.
This is the only country in the world at nighttime that is completely blacked out when you're flying over it. There's not a single light to be had. They're starving their own people to death. Cannibalism is a routine thing in North Korea. They actually worship the pudgy leader of that country as if he were a god. Imagine deifying this? No. This is how bad it is in North Korea. And a recently escaped prisoner, for lack of a better word, we won't call them citizens, actually realizes now that educational indoctrination is much worse in this country than even in North Korea.
So we have Yeonmi Park. She's a student at Columbia University. She has her own website, and she kind of writes like articles and blogs. And just to give you a little background, she lived in North Korea for 14 years. Then she escaped to China in 2007. And then she was forced into the sex slave trade. Wait, I thought China was so great, though. I'm so confused.
Yeah.
And then later
LeBron said so.
So later she made her way to South Korea, and then she moved to the U.S. in 2014. So she's been here for about 7 years. And she says on her own like little bio, basically on her website, that she's grateful for two things in her life of 27 years. First, being born in North Korea, and second, escaping it. Yeah. She says on her website that both of these events have shaped who she is today, and their experiences she would not trade for an ordinary and peaceful life. Wait, she would not trade those for an ordinary and peaceful life. So all of you American college kids who are like, my life is so rough. This woman escaped North Korea and is now studying at Columbia University and says she would not trade the experience in life that she has had.
Speaking fickle and childish college kids, those of you too who want to make an argument that America is the epicenter of evil in the world, pretty sure that the kind of sex trafficking she experienced in China, not to say that we don't have it here, but that's a whole another level of depravity. Maybe we ought to stop pretending that China is this wonderful country just because they happen to be socialist, and realize that they are much more violent, much more repressive than almost any regime in the world, except possibly North Korea.
So Park decided that when she was talking about education, she wrote an article talking about indoctrination and how it's actually worse in the United States. She said she spent half her life in North Korea, and school begins there at an early age to start the indoctrination process of a new generation to support an historically brutal family dictatorship that has ruled the country since 1948. We all know who we're talking about here. Mr. Pudgy. I'd rather just call him Mr. Pudgy than Xi Jinping.
Well, let's call it Xi. Xi's Winnie the Pooh. And
this is North Korea.
Kim Jong-un can be Piglet.
Yes.
Pooh and Piglet.
Pooh and Piglet. That's funny. Anyway, so she said, obviously having experienced that, she knows what brainwashing actually looks like. So Columbia University, hoity-toity that you are, she saw it right away. And she says she knew it even before getting to Columbia, but then when she got to Columbia, it's just, she got sucked it.
She was actually shocked when she got here at what she saw. She said not even, quote, North Korea was this nuts in their brainwashing efforts, as is the university in undermining Western cultural and social achievements. And unlike in North Korea, she is paying a fortune to the university to be so indoctrinated. Quote, I expected that I was paying this fortune all this time and energy to learn how to think, but they are forcing you to think the way they want you to think. I realized, wow, this is insane. I thought America was different, but I saw so many similarities to what I saw in North Korea that I started worrying.
And here are the similarities: an anti-Western sentiment and guilt tripping.
Yeah.
That's what she says. In her first week, she wasn't even in the classroom yet, but she experienced during the orientation week to Columbia University when a staff member scolded her for even liking classic literature. So there's the guilt tripping in this anti-Western sentiment right there. She was told the authors, as racist and bigots, had a colonial mindset that subconsciously brainwashed readers. And it's her first week at Columbia. This is not her first language. In fact, she speaks 3 languages. 3 languages. So she was a little kind of confused by, the various things that come up in English. And one of those very difficult things in English is pronouns. So the gender pronouns really got her confused. Again, this is all just like orientation week stuff. She's finding all this out immediately. She said, English is my 3rd language. I learned it as an adult. I sometimes still say he or she by mistake, and now they are going to ask me to call them they? How the heck do I incorporate that into my sentences? It was chaos.
Well, I do love the fact that she pointed out that in her English literature classes, her reading the great books of Western culture, the antidote to what goes on in places like China and North Korea, she was told that she shouldn't like classical literature, particularly Western literature, because it subconsciously puts bias in your head. So this is how bad it is. You can't even show the bias in the book. You just have to assume it's sublimated somehow, right?
So this is the big thing I want the takeaway in the quote she gives here. It's talking about the loss of critical thinking, and that's the number one thing that if we could get back would pretty much solve everything if people could just think. She says a loss of critical thinking she observed in North Korea. That loss is what she's seeing now in America. And she warns, here's what she says, people see things, but they've just completely lost the ability to think critically. You guys have lost common sense to a degree that I as a North Korean cannot even comprehend. Where are we going from here? There's no rule of law, no morality, nothing is good or bad anymore. It's complete chaos. I guess that's what they want, to destroy every single thing and rebuild it into a communist paradise.
Today's show is sponsored by Clean Start Hand Sanitizer. For an odor-free foam hand sanitizer that lasts 2 hours and provides 19 refills, visit freedomproject.com/clean. That's KLEEN to order yours today.
Huzzah! Let's leave today with some good news. Well, we have good news across the nation where anti-critical race theory candidates for school boards are actually doing pretty well. We were a couple weeks ago talking about the Virginia race for governor. Well, it's also the local school board races that you should be paying attention to as well. And those races and all across the country, they're doing not too shabby. We found there is actually a 1776 Project PAC, a PAC, that had focused on helping the anti-CRT, also known as just common sense parents, get elected to these school boards. So it's 1776 Project PAC. They're obviously a PAC, and they're allowed to then fund and support these candidates. And in statewide elections, that again, we talked about a couple weeks ago, candidates won 3/4 of the 58 races across the nation. That's, if you win 75%, hey, guess what? That's the majority. So they won 75% of the 58 races, and that is, we're not just talking, it's down in the rural South or something. I'm sure it's across Republican areas, it's across Democratic areas. Basically, parents are waking up and saying, you know what? I think I want my kids to just learn something. So as Axios reported, 13 Pennsylvania school board candidates backed by the PAC, or PAC, won their races, along with 11 in Colorado, 9 in Kansas, 4 in New Jersey, 3 in Virginia, and 2 each in Ohio and Minnesota. Those are states across the board.
Yeah, the report says that they're not just winning in Republican areas, as you pointed out, but several candidates won in solid blue counties: Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, Passaic County in New Jersey, and Johnson County in Kansas. The founder of the PAC, Ryan Garudsky, said, quote, "My PAC is campaigning on behalf of everyday moms and dads who want better access for their children's education and a better oversight of what goes on." That's really good news. And in fact, this is kind of neat. We have a whole day on a Monday. Every single story we've done is positive. We have homeschool kids kicking butt and taking names. Harvard revealing that home kids are doing just fine, better than public school kids. We've got an expatriate from North Korea, a Chinese sex slave, who says that going to school at Columbia now is more indoctrinating what happens in Asia. And now you have this wonderful story where some Republicans, anyway, have pulled their head out from their nether regions and saw what a really great opportunity education is to run on in this coming election cycle.
And if you like this positiveness on the Dr. Duke Show and you want to hear some of these good stories, well, send them our way, because we don't get as many as positive stories in education as you'd hope. So, hey, we're having a good time over here. But what does it mean for the future? All right, it sounds like, okay, maybe there's just this little window of time where these anti-critical race theory parents, they're all jacked up and fired and ready to go. What does it look like moving forward, though? Because are they going to just get, kicked out the next time? Well, it could mean bigger victories they're anticipating in the future if this movement continues on. Ballotpedia is noted that significant activism was had of 88 school districts across the nation regarding race in education, critical race theory stuff, coronavirus pandemic responses, sex education, or gender identity. So Ballotpedia took a look at these races, and they're seeing there's a lot of weight, a big momentum, if you will, of parents finally standing up and saying no more. So in terms of future elections here, it could happen. 2022 could be our year. I thought 2020 was going to be our year, and then I was like, okay, well, 2021 is going to be our year. Now everyone's just looking forward to 2022 being a positive year for everyone.
It's time on a Monday for some real education. We're going back to some Mannerist paintings, at the height of Renaissance culture in Europe. This is if you show the picture, Mike, it's the Flagellation of Christ. It's by Sebastiano del Piombo, painted about 1525. Now, del Piombo was born in 1485 and lived until 1547. His life expectancy was, he was born the same year Michelangelo was, and lived till about the middle of the Mannerist period. He was an Italian painter of the High Renaissance and early Mannerist periods, famous as the only major artist of the period to combine the coloring of the Venetian school, in which he was trained, with the monumental forms of the Roman school. Take a look at the picture. Those colors, you can see the brights. You can see even the muted blue is sharp. The imagery, the coloring, very Eastern Italian, very Venezia, those colors. But the manneristic forms and poses and body images, the blocky bodies. This is the story, of course, of the flagellation of Christ, where he is tied to a column and he is whipped brutally by his Roman captors as a way of punishing him. This was, I believe, Pontius Pilate's idea. You may recall that the Jewish high priests wanted Christ crucified. Pontius Pilate could find no real reason to do it, so he turned Christ over to be whipped, hoping that would be enough, and then this would be all over, and yet, no, the pressure remained to not just flagellate Christ, but to crucify him. And there you can see in the image there this beautiful, almost sort of horrific dance of the movement from left to right. You've got the man on the right with the whip, his right hand high above, and you trace the arc of that line from his fist down across the chest of Jesus, all the way down to the feet of the other tormentor, the one who is tying him to the column. And the column is an absolutely gorgeous piece of Roman painting, right? You can see the veins of color in that marble, and the idea that you're chaining the Son of God, the Jewish Son of God, to a Roman column, to be whipped by Roman authorities, and then to be executed at the behest of the Jews, is a stunning image. It really pops out at you. And of course, the entire light in the picture emanates directly off the body of Christ. He is the light that came into the world. He is the light that came into the darkness, and you can see how dark both swarthy the Roman soldiers are and how dark the background is. This light came into a dark world, the Gospel of John tells us, and the light was not recognized by the darkness. The light had created the world, and the darkness did not see it.
All right, before we go, let's show some love to our Patriot Club members. And today, we'd like to give a shout out to Pat from Whittier, California. Pat, thank you for supporting us. And that wraps up this show for Freedom Project. I'm Katie, and he's Dr. Duke.
Until next time, stay educated, my friends.